I'm just going to do a very short presentation on the Loughborough University's support for research and enterprise. So you've got an idea kind of how we're structured and the types of support that we provide centrally. So one thing I'd like to just mention to start with is at Loughborough, all of our support, the majority of our support for research and enterprise activity is central. So we do have administrators based within our schools, which I'll talk about later, but all of our support for research, grants, development, contracts, costings and budgets and all that type of thing is all central. But we are aligned to the different departments and schools within the university. So people know who they can come and ask questions to if they need to know anything. And it seems to work quite well that way. But I have worked at other universities where it's very different, and it's the functions are small teams within schools supporting academics directly, and sometimes that works really well too. So it just really depends on the institution and how it works and all that type of thing. This is the building that Adam and I work in at Loughborough. So hopefully at some point, some of you might get an opportunity to come and see it. We're super lucky. It's a really old building. It used to be student accommodation. And I think about 15 years ago, they turned it into the administrative offices. So apparently there's a ghost in the tower at the top, but I personally haven't ever seen the ghost. Adam, have you seen the ghost?
Not yet, no.
Okay. In 5 years, I've not seen the ghost. But the Vice-Chancellor is in this building, and the Provost, and all the senior management of the university. And one thing that I think is really cool about Loughborough that I've not seen at any other university is we have 3 Pro-Vice-Chancellors. So we have one for teaching, one for research, and one for enterprise. And they share an office together. Like, it's a big office, but they share it. And I've never seen that anywhere, because normally senior academics quite like their own offices, but yeah, they share an office. So that's quite kind of cool, actually. I really like it, and I think it helps them work together better as well. So we just have that kind of collegiality at Loughborough, and it's one of the things I really like about it. So just a little bit about Loughborough for those of you that don't know. I appreciate it's not an easy name to pronounce from how it's spelt if you've not seen it before, but it's Loughborough, and that's how we pronounce it. But I will never be offended if any of you ever get it wrong, because it's a bit of a weird spelling. We're a really good university. I'm really proud to work there. So we're in the top 10 in all the National League tables. So you know, we recruit students really well. We're made up of 9 academic schools, which within them sit a series of disciplines and departments. We've also got a postgraduate campus on the Queen Elizabeth Park in London. So I don't know if you watched the London Olympics, but that's where our London campus is based, on the site where the London Olympics were held. But that's purely for postgraduate, and it attracts a lot of international postgraduate students as well. And we also have a science and enterprise park as well, where we have a lot of small businesses. They're based there, and you know, it's really nice because it means we can build really good collaborations with businesses that are based on our business park. So that's pretty awesome as well. Obviously, there's lots more to tell you about Loughborough, but I'll leave it at that for today. And if you want to know more, just let me know. So I mentioned we're made up of 9 academic schools. So these are the schools that we have. I'm not going to read them all out because you're all very capable of reading yourselves. The school that this project works with is the School of Social Sciences and Humanities, with the specific geography department. So the academics who work on the project are based within geography. But as you can see, we've got a really wide range of departments and schools. And the one thing we don't have at Loughborough is a medical school. So we don't do any medical research or anything like that. But our School of Sports, Exercise and Health Sciences does do quite a lot of research around well-being and exercise and physical health. So there's quite a lot going on there as well. So the Research and Enterprise Office, we did used to be split into 2 separate departments. We had the Research Office and the Enterprise Office, but we now only have one director for both. So we were merged into one. And it's made up of this list of teams, which I'll explain to you what each of these does, because I think it's quite interesting because they look at really different things. And also, we report into the Pro-Vice Chancellors. So although we have a Director for Research and Enterprise, she works very closely with the Pro-Vice Chancellors for Research and Enterprise as well. So they will often dictate the direction and the activities they want us to do from a strategic perspective. And then we'll implement what's needed from like a compliance perspective from our funders and what they need us to do. So it's like a balance of both activities. So I mentioned research enterprise, and we also have teaching as well. Hopefully you can see that triangle okay. So this just kind of covers the types of activities that sit within each part of it. So you have enterprise in the middle, research on the right, and teaching on the left. So those are the types of activities that are covered within those three areas at the university. So we support what we call the research and enterprise pipelines. Hopefully most of you are familiar with TRLs, so technology readiness levels, because the EU uses that quite a lot on their work programs to give you an idea what kind of activity they're targeting the call at. So it goes all the way from 1, which is like a really fundamental idea around theoretical research, all the way up to 9, which is effectively having a product or a service that you can sell on the market. And we support this actually the whole way through between the different parts of the office. And you can see the types of activities that we support under that at different points during the process. So we cover quite a lot, to be honest, between us. It's a big team. I forgot to mention as well, we're a team of about 80 people in total, covering all this activity. So yeah, it's a really, really big team. And the research support team itself now is, I think it's about between 25 and 30 people just supporting research. So we're really, really lucky to have such a big team, to be honest. I've worked in other UK universities that have much, much smaller teams. So we are very, very lucky. So I'll talk about the research development and support team first. So this is the team that Adam and I sit in. And these are the types of activities we cover. So me as a research development manager, I typically get involved in the more strategic work, so supporting elements of the research strategy, identifying funding opportunities for the academics to apply for, helping write the grant applications. I sometimes get a little bit involved in budgets, but that tends to sit with my colleagues who specifically focus on costing support. So every proposal that we submit kind of has a mini team supporting it, of a research development manager and somebody to support with costings, and then later somebody to support with contracts. So we have to work together very, very closely to make sure things are successful and things don't fall through the gaps either, because when you have more than one person involved, it can sometimes be a little bit tricky. We look to optimise research networks as well. So where there are opportunities to collaborate with other organisations, we identify those. Developing real blue skies research funding applications, although sometimes there can be more applied. It really depends on the funder. So at Loughborough, we actually get most of our funding for research from what's called UK Research and Innovation. So most of our funding is actually UK based rather than EU. And a lot of that is very blue skies, maths and physics, and it's real research, kind of less than TRL 6 for sure. We also cost and submit the applications within our office. So that sits under what's called our research support team. So they develop all the budgets with the academics and make sure that the salary costs are correct. That's one of the issues that we have quite a bit, is academics not really understanding what their actual salary is from a cost perspective, because they don't take into account the tax or pension contributions that might be part of their overall salary cost. So we really ask them not to try and figure out what their staff costs are, and we do that for them. And we've got systems that do that. We use a system called Aggresso, which I don't know if you've got any system in place at all, but it's really cool because it pulls all the salary information from our HR system, and it does a lot of that for us, which is really helpful. The team that Adam sits in does drafting and negotiating research contracts and agreements, and I know he's going to talk a little bit more later about what the details of what his team does. And then we also support award startup as well. So once the project's awarded, you know, do we need to make checks on who we can recruit, you know, all that type of stuff. And the research support team also supports the grants once they're awarded as well, but only from a financial perspective. So they don't carry out project management or anything like that. You know, they keep a track on the budget and where the spend is, and that's the type of activity that they cover, and checking things like timesheets and, you know, that, and pulling together claims and that type of thing. So that's that team. We've got a partnership development team who look after partners and collaborators, and they look at bringing in external organisations that are non-academic to work with our academics to increase the impact of their work. So, you know, are there products that could be developed and that type of thing. They support knowledge exchange as well. So we've got some really nice funding in the UK which supports knowledge exchange activities and more applied research, and also give real opportunities for academics to embed themselves working with industry, or recruit people who then work with both industry partners and academia. So there's some really nice opportunities there. And they also enable professional work. So a lot of our academics do consultancy work as well for companies or for other organisations, and the partnership development team would support that activity as well. We also have a commercialisation team. Now this was quite new, and it's quite a small team as well, and they're very specialised and niche in what they do. So they look at IP basically, and figure out how best we can protect ourselves and benefit from the new knowledge that we generate as an institution. They undertake things like market assessment and thinking about how we can take advantage of the knowledge that we have developed. They look at licensing agreements with commercial organisations. And also they set out spin-out companies from the university. Now, in the past, we didn't really have many spin-outs, but that seems to be changing quite a lot, and we've got quite a few now, and that seems to be going quite well. They also support our enterprise park in terms of incubation of small companies who need that first step to then be able to grow. And it's really beneficial having them in a university environment to get them up to speed. And they also provide entrepreneurial training to our academics as well, and outside. So we've got some regional partnerships where this team work with other universities in the region as well, and we get funding for that. Managing research and impact. So we have a team that look at research compliance and policies, and also online management of research outputs and impact. So I don't know how familiar you are with the UK system, but we get measured quite heavily on impact. We have an assessment every sort of 5 years. All the universities in the UK do. It's called the Research Excellence Framework, if you feel the urge to go and look at it. It's a really big exercise, and the outcomes of that determine how much funding we get from the government as an organisation. So it's a bit competitive how we get our funding from government, which it makes it a bit more challenging. So we have a very small team to support that. But they also look at things like research integrity and doing things the right way, and best practice as well within the sector. And then we also look at visibility and reputation. So I mentioned REF, which is the Research Excellence Framework. So they provide advice around that and manage the process. But we've also got some really, really great people who have expertise around publishing papers and the kind of ethical ways of doing that with open access and being fair to people. You know, early career researchers who, I don't know if you use the H index much, but we don't use that as an institution because we don't feel it's fair for early career academics and women. Actually, it can be quite detrimental. So we've decided as an institution that we don't use that type of measurement for our academics. And then, yeah, open access compliance. So some of our funders have requirements that when we publish things from the grants, the EU is obviously the same. They should be open access. They shouldn't be in paywall journals. They should be, you know, available beyond that, because it is public funding at the end of the day. And I think this is the last team. So we also have a team that look at researcher development. So they look at building a doctoral community. So all of our PhD students instead of them sitting on their own with their supervisors, try and create a bit more of a community so that they don't feel so isolated and they can work together with others that are kind of on similar subject areas to them and get involved in new things. They also do training and skills development for our researchers, particularly early career researchers. We do part of that training around grant writing activity for our early career academics, but they do all sorts of other things as well for career development and that type of thing. Because not all researchers want to stay in academia, some of them might want to move out into other sectors later. So it's giving them the skills and training that they need to be able to do their job, but also develop their careers in the direction that they want to do. They also identify funding for fellowships and studentships. So things like Marie Curie ITNs and doctoral training programs, that's the type of thing that they would typically work on. And they also provide a physical space for early career researchers as well and PhD students. So we have a building which is called the Doctoral College, and it's just got a space for our PhD students to go if they want to work there. I think they've got like a lounge area and things like that, so they can actually genuinely collaborate and meet each other and not, as I say, not be so isolated, because doing a PhD is tough, as many of you probably appreciate. So they do quite a lot of work around that too. So that's the teams that we have. I'm going to talk a little bit about process, because we've got quite a strict process, but it didn't go down very well when we first implemented it, because no one wanted to follow a process. They just wanted to carry on doing things the way they always had. So we were having a problem in that we didn't know what grants we knew what we were submitting, but we didn't know what was in the pipeline. We didn't know what was coming up. Academics were getting in touch with us with very late notice, which meant we had to work really hard, because they would give us 3 days notice that they were putting in a proposal, and we had to do all the costings, and it just got very complicated. So we now have a rule that they have to give us at least 10 working days notice of any proposal they want to submit. And if they give us less than that, we don't do it. We'll occasionally make exceptions if, for example, somebody's been invited into a consortium quite late in the day. So if the proposal's already written and they just needed an extra partner, sometimes we'll accept that situation. But generally, if someone comes to us with less than 10 days notice and we're busy, we will just say no to them. And that took a little while to kind of get agreement from academics and particularly senior management. It didn't go down very well to start with, but now it's embedded and everyone follows it and they know the rules, and it's really helped us in terms of workloads and managing the support that we can give to people. So what we have is we have an online form, which is just a Microsoft form, and it's got a bunch of questions that we ask them to fill in. So it looks like this, and what they do is they provide the details about when the deadline is, who the funder is, roughly how much time they want to spend on the project, so we can do an initial stab at what the budget might look like for them, because sometimes they can be quite off with their estimation of staff costs, as I mentioned before. So they put all the information onto this form, and then they submit it, and who it goes to really depends on the academic and which school they're in. So it will always come through to the research office, and there's specific people who manage these as they come in. And then, so for the School of Science, I would always get a copy as well, so I can see what's coming up, which then means I can then get in touch with the academic and say, oh, I can see you're putting in a proposal. Do you need any help? Do you need any support? Where are you at with it? And it just means we can sort of manage the process a lot better. And I can plan a bit more because I've got a bit more notice of these bids going in. So I think it works really well. Adam thinks it works really well for the most part. And yeah, I think it's just a great thing to do because you can just manage it all a lot more. The other thing is it goes to an individual within each school as well. So typically it goes to the Associate Dean for Research, and then it's their job to make sure that peer review happens for the proposal. So we don't get involved in peer review from an academic perspective. That's the school's responsibility, and that they need to manage that themselves. But we did implement it, and it does work well, and most schools do take it seriously. So this kind of prompts that process, if that makes sense. So that's our process. And then I wanted to talk about approvals as well, which I know Adam's going to talk about contracts approvals later, but this is grant submission approvals. So this is the process that we have in place. I appreciate this is quite a wordy slide. So the first bit is the costing support request comes into us in the research office. And after that, we develop the budget for the project, whether it's just for that individual academic and their little team, or whether we need to go out and get input from partners. It just depends on who the funder is and what type of project it is. So we usually do a first version, and then we'll then refine those costings further with the academic who's leading the grant application, because that they know what the available budget is, and we can talk to them and figure out where we're best spending the money, where we might need to make reductions, where we can potentially increase it, that type of thing. Once the budget is finalised, the school has to approve it. So somebody within the school has to approve the budget. If the school does not approve it, it can't be submitted. So we do quite a lot of chasing to get approvals from the school. It depends which school as to who approves it. So sometimes it's the Associate Dean for Research, sometimes it's the Dean of the school. It depends on the individual school and whatever process they've got in place. Sometimes it's the Operations Manager for the school as well. So it's just whatever's appropriate for that particular school. And then, as I said before, they also ensure that the peer review process takes place as well. So once it's been approved by the school, it can then be submitted by the academic. So we get really frustrated with EU bids because anyone could submit them anytime without any approvals, whereas the UK funding submission system is quite different. So if an academic submits a proposal to UK research and innovation funders, it goes, once they submit it, it goes into what's called the submitter pool. And the research office manages that submitter pool, which means somebody from our research office can then go into the proposal, check it all, check the budget's correct, check there's nothing missing, check the font size is right and the margins are right and all the other requirements that the funder has. And then once they're happy with that, then they submit the final version. If they're not happy with it, they can return it back to the academic to fix whatever's wrong with it and then send it back. So we like that system because it means we can check things properly, whereas EU proposals, we can't stop anyone submitting those, which makes it a bit more challenging. Particularly large or complicated projects sometimes need to be approved by our operations committee, particularly if there's an institutional commitment. So some funding doesn't fund all of our costs, or it's got costs associated with it. So a really good example is one I worked on a few years ago. It's from one of our funders called Research England. And we needed to put an in-kind contribution into the project. It was a requirement of the funder. So we decided we were going to put some staff time into it for free, basically at Loughborough's cost. But we also wanted to contribute some studentships as well, so we could have some PhD students working on the grant. But because it was quite a big financial commitment, we had to go through our operations committee to say, look, this is what we want to do. This is why it's important. This is why it's strategically important for the university. And then we have to get an approval from them as to what we want to do. And once they're happy with it, then it's all been agreed and that's all fine. But often academics get in trouble for not having gone through that process for particularly big projects. So that's an additional thing that we have in place for particularly big or complex bids as well. And it's a bit of a pain because you have to pull together all the paperwork and papers for the committee. But it's just an extra level of governance that the university has to make sure things are kind of working okay, you know.